Merry Christmas, everyone. This time of the year, it's about opening your heart. But it's not about opening your heart to the love of the world. It's about opening your heart to God. And in doing so, opening your heart to your fellow man without expectation, without expecting anything in return. And when we do that, we actually get the greatest return. For as we mimic the generous heart of God and we give our love freely to one another, it is given to us freely, and it amplifies. And if you give that love to another who is giving it back, it amplifies all the more. And so when we go into a holiday like Christmas, fear should not be present. The hope that consumerist goods will make you happy should not be present. The hope that someday in the future will solve your problems and give you the happiness you don't have today should not be present. We should be able to go into every day, especially our holidays, filled with a love, filled with a joy, ready to share it with the world. I learned this long ago, and I discovered that this human condition of wanting energy that we all have, and yet we look for that energy in the wrong place. We look for it in the world, in things outside of ourselves. That this want for energy is only filled when we mimic the generous heart of God. Because when we mimic the generous heart of God, we are not truly mimicking it. We are moving into the realization of the truth that the love with which we have loved one another is actually the love that we are. And that there was a veil of thought of self that was fragmenting the flowing forth of that love, and we had not realized it, and we had mistook the self for who we are and the love for something the self does, never realizing the love is who we are and the self is something that is dulling the understanding and experience, is perhaps not the right word. It's dulling the presence of that love. Christmas is a time to open your heart, but the devil will find any way to get your mind to close it. The mind is the devil's battlefield, and he will find any way to make you close your heart at any time, but even at Christmas, times where we are supposed to be open-hearted, jovial, happy, sharing love. Last night, here in the UK, there is a wonderful animation called The Snowman by Raymond Briggs. It's a very beautiful piece. It has no dialect. It is only accompanied by an orchestral score. And so there is a tradition of watching it in the UK. And I took my children with my family last night to see it on a big screen with a live orchestra playing the music and one choir boy singing a choir piece from within that music. And it was so moving, and the energy was wonderful. A room full of families, open hearts, just celebrating creation, celebrating joy, and celebrating the happiness of life, and celebrating the gift of unity. God was present in that room. I could feel it. You could taste it. You could touch it. My little boy, who was 4 when he left there, he said that the music was so beautiful that God spoke to him. And we said, "What did God say?" And he said, "God told me to stop being so mean to my little brother." Because he's 4 and his brother's 2, and he's experiencing jealousy and things of this nature at this stage in his life. But this music opened his heart. It was so beautiful that it silenced his self, which all children generate and must generate. and his heart came through, and when his heart came through, he felt, as he looked at his brother, he should not be so mean to him, and he determined that that was God talking to him. And you see, at this time of the year, many are lost in consumerism, and I've mentioned this. We must be wise. We must not expect the world to fulfill our joy. We must expect our joy to be found within and expressed in the world. We should never seek in the world, for then we get trapped, then we are vulnerable. And this Christmas there are those tangled in there, and it's up to our own discipline and discernment to not be. And there are those who will celebrate the solstice, which was always a celebration of hope. If you look back at the history records we have a few hundred years ago, surviving winter was tough. And the solstice is the time where the sun in the sky. We used to watch this big burning light in the sky. We had no science. We had different frameworks to understand it, some spiritual, some religious. These days we mostly look at it with science. But these are all perceptions of the mind and can be different wherever you go. And so we used to watch this burning light without any of these scientific perceptions. And all we knew is that at Christmas time, it passed through certain constellations, went into the solstice where it did not rise in the northern hemisphere. It didn't rise from the horizon, from within the earth. And then on Christmas Day, it would resurrect. And that day marked its journey back towards spring. And we celebrated because it was the light of the world returning back towards the spring and summer months, and our food stores were getting empty, and we knew that we would be able to sow and harvest our food soon. Now, as we watched this, it passes through a constellation called the Crux, which is a crucifix. And then it sits for 3 days and resurrects on Christmas Day. So these stories impacted Christianity. No doubt, and the Spirit of truth, the Holy Spirit should be present, not your ego, not your arrogance, not your struggle with that, because this is the truth. You can watch it in the sky, and it would be crazy not to recognize the severe similarity between this story and the story of Yeshua. But it does not take away from Yeshua. It doesn't touch the value of this man's beauty and teachings. It does not touch it. It amplifies it. That this celebration of hope that we celebrated is also a celebration of hope in the idea, in the story, that an unconditioned love was born in a Christ child. A child was born that knew no condition on their love and had compassion that knew no depths. It's beautiful. It doesn't detract from it. And so there are those, however, before I move on to Yeshua and Christ Mass and the birth of Christ and the Nativity, which is profoundly important, a roadmap to the truth. But the vast majority are celebrating Christmas, which again is a celebration of hope. They are celebrating the birth of a Christ child, a child whose love knows no condition, compassion knows no depth, has endless peace, endless patience, perfected love. It's an amazing, hopeful story. And I, like many of you, have an emotional attachment to the notion of this historical story, to the notion of the birth of divinity in a man. I did nativity scenes as a child as well, and we all have many have nativity scenes in their home or in their communities. And with that knowing of exploring my heart, that there is an emotional connection to that, I want to take that story, the literal story, and just put it to one side a second. And I want to show you that just as how that music opened my son's heart by allowing his mind, his self, to be still. I want to show you that this is always the answer to knowing today, right now, the intimate peace, love and presence of Christ. Christ is that word that points at that unconditionally loving presence of God within us. When you have had times in life where it's been so beautiful, your child is born, you've been married, things of this nature, that it overwhelms you. And as it overwhelms you, tears come and your heart bursts open. What has happened is the environment in front of you is so perfect to you that it closes down the self and the veil of thought, and the true nature comes through. And the release of that energy can come in laughter, in tears, but the true nature comes through you at that time. The true nature of who you are is love. The generous heart of God that pours forth all creation, with free will and infinite potential included, is just giving, giving, giving. When you fall into that true nature of what you are, you enter a space where you no longer are with a self that's judging good and evil. You see the world through the loving eyes of God, through the loving heart of God. And this is called non-dual awakening. No longer are you analyzing. No longer are you separated from this dance of creation. As you analyze, you create the notion that you are a separate analyzer analyzing something. When you awaken, you recognize that you are inseparable from it, and you must therefore by grace move in faith. You don't need to analyze and separate anymore. The organism in faith follows. The organism in faith moves by the will of God. And if you seek the will of God, it is the one time that you will always find what you seek. I know this. And so to know the story of Christ and the birth and nativity is of no value to humanity if right here, right now, we cannot feel the peace, the love and the presence of Christ in our hearts. It's of no value, because then we can't open up our hearts. We can't bring the supernatural love that Yeshua brought to the world, to love your neighbor, to turn the other cheek. We can't bring those new gifts of the Spirit, for we are walking based upon the rules of the world, which is the rules of the self. The self analyzes its way through life, believing its only impact on reality is through its intellect and voice and movement of its hands. The man who is born into spirit knows the impact he has on reality is beyond there. He knows that his speech, his energy, his intentions can have impact. His supernatural capacities are awakened, which Yeshua promised. And they appear supernatural to the natural man, but they seem perfectly normal once they are awoken. And so traditionally, we have this nativity story, and if we are not feeling the peace, presence and love of God today, right now, it's not yearning and burning in us and our eyes are lit up with it, then we need more. And that's because the story is a roadmap. Traditionally, the story is that there is a virgin mother. She's told by an angel, you will birth the Christ child. And so she heads to Bethlehem. And when she arrives, she tries to give birth in an inn, and they say there's no space, you'll have to go somewhere else. She goes to a more humble setting, a cave, stable, surrounded by animals. And there she begins to give birth, and another angel comes to shepherds who are tending to their sheep, tending to their herds, to their flocks. And this angel informs the shepherds that the Christ child's birth is imminent and they must go, and so they do. And in some Gospels, then from the east come the Magi, which are Iranian astrologers, the wise men, they come from the east. This, in a nutshell, is the Nativity. But let me show you something. If you are to see the world through non-dual consciousness, you are to see it through true humility, the loving heart of God as the perception by which you see, is where the personality of Christ can be born through the organism you are. As you look out at the world, you must be able to look at it without language, memory and knowledge. It has to happen, otherwise the self will remain. And the self will analyse, it will have its perceptions, its labels, and it will kill the moment. And so when we look out, and as Meister Eckhart said, nothing in the world is as close to God as stillness. Be still and know that I am God. Yeshua said, take no thought for your life. When we look out in that way, we are like children. We are humble, clueless. We admit we don't know. We stand before creation and admit, I don't know what I am, who I am, where I am. We've tried with science to define it, and we have some basic understanding of God's creation, but still science demands a miracle. It has all of this understanding, but it demands a miracle. The Big Bang. It insists upon this miracle. And so in the true reality, as we look out, the consciousness is pure, it's fresh, it's virgin. It is virgin consciousness to see the world without language and memory, without self refracting and organising it, without the veil of thought, organising, labelling, refracting reality, is to look out with pure virgin consciousness, just to be loving awareness, to be the loving witness, is virgin consciousness. And there, the angelic is heard, and we can begin the journey of giving birth to the qualities of Christ in our life, in our heart. And so we head to give birth, and we go to the inn, and of course we can't, because an inn is a very loud and busy place, and it represents the place that stimulates the body, the senses of the body, the impulses of the body, and stimulates the veil of thought and the chatter and the sense of self within there. You can't give birth to the Christ there. It's an internal inn, it's not a physical. You can be in a physical inn and give birth to the qualities of Christ, but you have to be able to overcome the world to do that. It cannot be, that setting cannot be able to stimulate your body. You have to be able to allow that anchoring in the presence of Christ to be louder than the setting. But this is referencing an internal inn, the inn inside you, which is the self, the place of your addictions, the place of the chatter of your mind, the endless stream of thoughts that you are paying attention to each one. Can't be born there. And so you must move to a quieter place. The shepherds must be involved, for shepherds watch. They watch their flocks, they watch their herds, they watch their animals. And we must watch our thoughts to reach virgin consciousness. For as you become aware of your thoughts, then you can connect to the truth of what you are. You may say you are John, you are an Englishman, you are a charity founder, a father, a husband, a son, a YouTube video creator. But these are all roles and labels that I am aware of. And therefore, I am the awareness that is aware of them. And that's my true core fundamental nature. That awareness. And when you can connect to that awareness, you can become nothing but loving awareness. And when you can become nothing but loving awareness, you can access your virgin consciousness. And when you are in that virgin consciousness and you are in that state where you have separated from thought by watching it, by watching your flocks, you will see the beginning of a transformation. You will see the beginning of a change of your heart. For the self is gone. And the self is the one which conditions love in this world, and you will awaken a new love, a new depth. simply by not having the veil of thought there. By becoming loving awareness, virgin consciousness, the love will awaken. Not through any effort of a self, it will awaken. It always was who you are. This love is moving in you. It's moving from you. And it is contracted and conditioned. And it is contracted and conditioned only by the veil of thought. And so you set it free. And you feel it begin to transform you. You begin to give birth to the Christ child in you, the qualities of Christ in you. And you may go to the inn and you recognize this doesn't work. The noise of the mind, the impulse of the body, its addiction, it doesn't work. The inn, I can't feel that Christ child transforming me anymore, so I must return back to the quiet place, the cave or the stable. And there, in the animal nature, after becoming aware of our thoughts and accessing virgin consciousness, becoming the loving witness, the qualities of that unconditioned love of Christ is born. And through watching our thoughts, we access the virgin consciousness as the shepherds watch their flocks. And the ancients used the word right and east to point at the space within a human organism, the human being, the human soul embodied in a body, where it gave birth to spiritual wisdom was always the east and the right. That's why the promised land is in the east, the right hand of God. Cast your net to the right side of the boat. And so the Magi come from the east. The spiritual wisdom arrives from the east, from that space wherever within us that it is born. And there we awaken the open heart and the love of God. It's a roadmap. It is a roadmap. And in that space you will love all that you meet. You won't like all that you meet, but what happens is your heart is open. And so as your heart is open, you do not see through the filter of memory. You do not see through the filter of opinion, analysis and language. You see with your heart, and no matter who you meet, from child to murderer, you will love them. And I guarantee that that is the truth. For we have become guardians of children who raped and murdered. And the love I felt for those children as I met them was no different to the love I felt for the innocent children who had been caught up in abuse, etc. It was love first. It does not mean that you like them all, but it means that you love first. Whereas the majority of humans move into a situation and the self comes first. The self wants to decide, do I like that person? Do I trust them? I'm not so sure. Instead they come in and I love this person. Let's find out what they're about. And this is the difference between moving in the Christic, for that love is dominant. And there, when the veil of thought is gone, and we have become the loving awareness by watching our thoughts, we've entered the virgin consciousness, the wisdom is awoken from the east, and we give birth to the qualities of Christ. There we find the tolerance, the peace, the love, the companionship, the protection, the friendship, the joy of Christ, the comfort of God. It's there. It's not in a history story. It's not in the future. It's not in a temple, in a church. It's not inside another human. For you it will always be within. For woe unto the lawgivers, for they take away the keys to the kingdom, for they do not enter within. When you know that peace of God, you will burn to share it with the world. And it will, the longer you stay as a free, unpolluted channel for it to manifest in the human story, the more love it will make manifest in the world around you. And the desires of self will be gone. its opinions, its wants, its dreams are all irrelevant. Its need to control, gone. 12 years ago, if you sat and told this human organism, 12 years from now, you will have a burning desire that consumes you like fire to build villages all over the world for special needs children, I'd have said, I don't think so. But God filled my heart with his desires. And I'm so grateful that he did. For my life is beautiful because I walk with God first. And at this time of the year, there are many who are lonely. At this time of the year of excess, there are children in the world who don't have their next meal accounted for, they don't have shoes, they don't have a bed. And unless we open up our shut up hearts, that will never change. And there are those who love God and have walked the religious path and they don't even feel it. And they wonder why. And it's because they've been told that they can add it on to the self. American, PhD, doctor, bus driver, school teacher, whatever, born again Christian. But being a born again Christian is not moving from self following a set of rules, it's a supernatural rebirth. But many Christian teachers with great hearts haven't understood that. And so the actual presence and peace of Christ is not with them. And so they can't teach others it. They can't share it. The rebirth is about eradicating all of the labels. And there, the natural birth of this love of Christ is the rebirth. You cannot love your family more than you love Yeshua, as he said. You cannot be his disciple unless you forget your mother, your father, your brother, your sister. He's referencing what he means. He's referencing the roles of who we believe we are. These thoughts. We need to become aware of them and return back to virgin consciousness. Be rid of nationality. Be rid of your relationships, only for a while. Be rid of your PhD. Be rid of your career path. All of these labels. Just put them down for a moment and don't let them influence the animation of your intelligence, your actions. And offer the organism in that space of emptiness to the personality of Christ. And that's rebirth. It's a supernatural rebirth. It's different. It's a love that penetrates. Because it's actually the love we were. And the penetration that's felt is because the thought is not there to stop it from coming forth. Just as how the music opened my son's heart and made him compassionately look to his little brother and make a decision not to be so mean to him. So this is the other nativity, the other virgin birth. It's profoundly important this Christmas. Because if you find comfort in the things I say, as I know many do, and if you're looking for comfort this season, the true comfort you want is the peace and presence of Christ. And it is with you. But you have to let go of the self and its arrogance and accept it through grace. And grace means that there's no analysis, searching, there's no space you can go to make it happen. And you'll say, so how do I do that? That voice there, that belongs to the self. And it can't do it. And you may say, so how do I get rid of that voice? That whole spectrum of energy you spoke from again, this is the self again. It can't do it. He says that, then how do I do it? That voice again. It is the self. It is the one in the way. You must allow the heart to consume it. And it can't make the heart consume itself. It can't do anything. All that can happen is the heart surrenders the self, surrenders the organism over. And that's grace. It's beyond the story of you. It's beyond your control, your desires, your selfish ambitions, as many of us have. It's beyond there. If you say, okay, so how do I get started? There's that self again. To get started, merely be. Be for a few days. Be without doing this. You don't have to be sitting in meditation constantly for God to move in you. My own mother, she does not meditate, but she does know God in her heart. Yesterday she went after receiving a phone call from a charity shop that she had won a raffle. So she headed down at a random time, and while she was there was an elderly man, and he was very poor, and he was checking his raffle ticket to see if he had won the raffle. And he was one number behind my mother, and it was a big hamper of food. And my mother said to him, "Can you hold this hamper for me?" And he did. And she said, "You can keep that." And this old man broke down in tears. It meant so much to him. And I can tell you now that it wasn't chance that she went to that shop at that time. This is the coordination of God. At this time of the year, He loves and cares about all of His children. And He knows this time of the year when you have all of these family movies, etc. out there, and there are happy families in your street, that for many it's a struggle. But if you are alone, you can open your heart and never feel alone again. And if others are alone, perhaps you can open your heart, give birth to the qualities of Christ in your life, and your actions, your speech towards them will open theirs and save them from a great deal of suffering. You just have to keep your heart open. Open towards that which does not harm others. And the heart is open when the mind is quiet. And the Nativity was a roadmap to that truth, that the qualities of Christ are born not in the inn, in the noisy place of the self, but in that space where we become the awareness that is our core fundamental nature. Merry Christmas, everyone. God bless. Bye.